It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It never is. I never do that to you guys. 30 minutes every day, Monday through Friday, giving you the football content that you need. And it's a teaching tutorial Thursday presented by DraftKings. That means Greg Cosell is in the house, the civilian GOAT, greatest of all time, from NFL Films, the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN. By the way, already tomorrow, we'll be giving away 3 more winners. A Spread the Word winner. We're looking for a few good quote tweeters. Sponsor confirmation email winner. Good sponsors this week. Fitbod, Masterworks, love it. And then the YouTube shout out. Just love those of you that go to youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, hit the subscribe button, and then reply with any type of comment. Speaking of that, I'm giving away the last 2 Madden codes today. I'm just kind of over it. I want to get rid of all of them. So make sure you're following me on social media at Ross Tucker NFL to find out how to get the one of these final 2 Madden codes. Would love, obviously, to give it to a listener. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, Greg. A lot to talk about, as always. Bunch of really critical games again this week. But I do want to start with a sad story. I'll actually be in Pittsburgh Saturday night, Christmas Eve, for the Raiders and the Steelers. They are retiring Franco Harris's jersey that night. It'll be the 3rd Steeler ever to have his jersey retired. And I guess suddenly, I don't have any more information than that, but passed away yesterday, Greg, at age 72. Just curious. Obviously, I know you've watched him a bunch. I don't know if you've ever had interaction with him, but just any thoughts you can share about Franco Harris, the player or the person, would be appreciated.
Yeah, I don't recall ever meeting Franco Harris, Ross, so I really can't speak to him as a person, although he is from South Jersey. He went to Rancocas Valley High School, which is not far from where I'm sitting right now at NFL Films. He was in a different era of football. It's interesting. He was part of a Steelers team that sort of made a transition. Those first 2 Super Bowls were built on the run game, and then they kind of made the transition with Terry Bradshaw as he developed into a Hall of Fame player, into a passing team with Stallworth and Swan, and Harris was obviously still great. But that's what I remember. I started working at NFL Films in 1979, so it was kind of at the end of the Steelers dynasty run. So I don't have memories of it other than watching as a fan when I was, in high school and college. But not memories necessarily from actually seeing tape of it. But it was just, that was, as you certainly know, that was a different era of football where backs were really considered foundational pieces of offense. Every team thought that you started your offense with the run game because everybody wanted to be like Vince Lombardi's Packers in the 60s. And that was the way the NFL saw offense up to a certain point where the game kind of changed. But that's the way look, you look back and how many backs were taken number 1, number 2, number 3 in drafts back then. I think was it 1980 when George Rogers was the first pick in the draft? It was just a different way that teams played.
It's really interesting to think about how much the game has evolved, and also really interesting. I never heard anybody describe it that way, that the first 2 Steelers championships were really built around the run game, and then
They were.
The next 2 more the passing game. It's funny, Greg. I've never watched. Their
defense is pretty good too, Ross. Their defense is pretty good
exactly.
too.
But I was born in '79, so I've never watched like really any of those games. It's unbelievable how much NFL films I have seen over the years of the Steelers in the '70s, like Lynn Swann making those catches in the Super Bowl. I like. Literally feels like thousands of times, Greg.
Yep. Well, it's funny, just before we move on, taking nothing away from Lynn Swann, who was obviously great. He's in the Hall of Fame. But I look at someone like John Stallworth, who was about 6'1", 6'2", really smooth, really fluid, that if he played today with his style, that we'd be talking about him as one of the greatest receivers ever to play the game, because he was I loved watching John Stallworth. And again, watching him as a fan because I was not working at Films, but then, of course, being here now, this is my 43rd season at NFL Films. I've seen highlights numerous times, obviously, and I just thought John Stallworth was so much fun to watch.
Let's get to some of the games this weekend, Greg. Let's start with tonight. I love when there's a good Thursday night game. I love when I'm excited to watch the Thursday night game. It's Zach Wilson and the Jets against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. Blank canvas, Greg, as I like to do. Your thoughts going into this one?
Well, we've discussed Trevor Lawrence numerous times over the last number of weeks, and he's continuing to play well. I would imagine most people want to hear more about Zach Wilson at this point after coming back and starting that game. And, of course, he's starting this evening. I think you saw the light athletic feet. You saw the live, loose arm with the easy ability to throw the ball on the move. I think everybody knows he's a talented guy. I think when you watch every single throw, you see a quarterback there's too many throws in which he was late, too many throws in which ball placement was poor, and he must become quicker mentally and more precise with his throws. When I study him, I see a quarterback that does not have the needed sync between his lower body and upper body, too many throws across his body. Now, this was his first start in a number of weeks, but I came away from the tape thinking probably just what everybody thinks. Boy, this guy's really talented, and that's why he was the number 2 pick in a draft, but he still has a ways to go. You almost wish that what you saw in this game was where he would have been last year after 4 or 5 starts.
Interesting. That's interesting. That's it, because obviously people are very curious. He had some good stats, but then there are also some throws. Almost feels like he's more comfortable when he's not in the pocket.
Yeah, and again, then you get into that discussion about those second reaction movement plays and what is the value we ascribe to them versus the ability to make the routine easy throws. He will make special second reaction plays. The question is, can he make enough, Ross, of the routine throws? Because at some point, you got to make those throws. You can't live off improvisational football.
Well, it was Saleh that said a couple weeks ago when he was asked about Mike White, he said he makes the easy look easy.
Yes,
which we know what he's what he's referring to there.
Of course.
You referenced Trevor Lawrence, Greg. I mean, I guess I'm excited to watch him tonight. I guess I'm just excited that it seems like he's going to be or has a chance to be what we thought he might be in high school and college.
Right. No, and he's clearly playing much better football over the last month. He's much more decisive.
That's what I was going to say. He gets rid of the ball quicker.
Yeah, without question. And it's funny because they just played the Cowboys, obviously, and the Cowboys have a really good pass rush. They're second in the league in sacks behind the Eagles. And I thought 2 things stood out to me in that game. I thought the Jaguars O-line did an excellent job in pass pro overall, but Lawrence helped. He got the ball out consistently within the timing and structure of the route concepts, and he was decisive, as he has been over the last month. And everything he's doing now is quicker, not too fast. He's not playing frenetically, but everything is quicker. And we've spoken about that, over the last month or so. And he's clearly more comfortable in the offense. And I think the offense is really presenting defined reads and throws for him so that he can feel more comfortable.
Let's talk Giants, Vikings.
Yep.
Greg, a couple of teams that are in great position to make the playoffs. 2 interesting games last week with that comeback by the Vikings as well as the Giants. Not a lot of people thought they'd go into Washington and get that game win Sunday night, Greg, but they did. Thibodeau really is a guy that impressed me in that one. What jumps out to you about Vikings and Giants?
Well, I think to me what stood out was the Giants have to play a certain way on offense because obviously they do not have a lot of quality at the receiver position. And we can debate Daniel Jones. I'm sure a lot of people do. But the bottom line point is they are not going to ask him to drop back 35, 40 times by choice. You're not going to see a lot of of intermediate and vertical passing game throws. Jones only has 21 completions of 20-plus yards, which is the fewest of any quarterback who has started every game. So they don't really have any kind of explosive element to their passing game. So what does that mean? It means they play a lot of close games. So it means the running game has to be a factor, particularly in the second half. And that's where they've been very erratic. This was a game where the running game was a factor, and that's why they were able to win. They got the ball with 6:06 remaining in the fourth quarter, and they had a 5-point lead, okay? 3 plays in a row. Barkley trap play 12 yards. Barkley inside zone 15 yards. Barkley inside zone 14 yards. That's the way they have to play in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter. The first time they played the Commanders, they had a lead as well late in the third quarter and could not run the ball at all. So they need to be able to run the ball in the second half of games because their defense is solid. Games are going to be close for the most part. And that's going to be a critical element as they keep playing these games.
Let's talk, Greg, about the Seahawks and the Chiefs. Doesn't feel like either one of these teams really playing as well as they were earlier in the year.
I would say that the Chiefs are playing well. They just look different, Ross, because what they've done over the last 4 or 5 weeks is they've evolved into a team that plays with a high percentage of multiple tight end personnel sets, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends. And their pass game is not quote unquote explosive. So you don't see the highlights and go, wow, look at this pass game. But this past week, Mahomes was 36 for 41. That's pretty good. And they rank really highly in a ton of offensive categories. It just looks different. It's less explosive. His longest completion this past week was 21 yards. But Mahomes is playing at a really high level. He's efficient. The ball comes out. He can still make those special plays, obviously. They use the tight ends. And one player who I think is absolutely worth talking about is the way over the last month they've used Jerick McKinnon. I mean, Jerick McKinnon has now become a critical piece in this offense. This past week, he played 62% of the offensive snaps, and he's played a lot of offensive snaps over the last month, 2 months. So he's become a big factor in their offense. I mean, he had 10 carries this week, 8 targets, 8 receptions in the pass game. So, again, it's different, but they're actually playing well on offense.
That's amazing, 36 of 41 for Mahomes, and they went to overtime. Isn't it?
It is.
I mean, you would think like overtime with the Texans, 36 of 41, you would think that game was not close.
Right. And as I said, the longest completion was 21 yards. So you're not seeing those big explosive plays, but the offense is efficient. They've had injuries at wide receiver. They've had a little bit of a revolving door at wide receiver. So, Mahomes has played, and so has Andy Reid, played to what they have. That's why they're playing more tight ends. And Mahomes has been really good.
Bengals and the Patriots. Kind of curious as to what you're seeing from both these teams.
Yeah, the Patriots offensively are week to week. They're I think they're a team that needs to run the ball well. I'm struggling what to make of their passing game. So I don't really know what to say about that other than it's inconsistent. It's a week to week deal. Some weeks I feel like, hey, Mac Jones is really looking like Mac Jones, efficient, balls coming out. That's his game. He's obviously not going to make a ton of second reaction plays. He's not a strong armed guy. So you're not going to see throws where you go, oh my God, look at that throw. So he has to be efficient. He has to be precise. Sometimes you see that, sometimes you don't. And again, there's a lot more to it than that. Obviously, it's not all his fault, but their pass game is week to week. The Bengals, I got to tell you, and we may have talked about this before, but I am really more intrigued about their defense. We know about their offense. Burrow's terrific. They've got 3 really good wideouts. We know about that. I think that Lou Anarumo just does not get enough credit. Look, last week, it almost reminded me of the AFC Championship game a year ago. First half, Tom Brady against them is 17 for 23 for 194. Second half, he comes out, makes some adjustments. You see more 3-man pressures. You see more coverage. You see multiple blitz schemes. You see a mix of a lot of different things. And all of a sudden, just like in that AFC Championship game last year against Mahomes, all of a sudden the Bucs passing game kind of gets shut down. So, I think that he's doing a really, really good job. He's very opponent specific. He adjusts well within the context of games. And I know Hubbard is out now for a while, but they've got pretty good players. They just don't have one guy who you say, wow, that guy's a superstar. But I think they've got good players at all three levels.
They do. Yeah, they have a lot. Like Reeder's good. Hendrickson's good. Logan Wilson's good. Bates is good. None of them are like considered elite or get talked about or get a lot of attention, but you're right. This game's getting a lot of attention for a lot of different reasons. It's the Eagles and the Cowboys. And curious, what you're thinking about this one. Obviously, I think a lot of people believe it'll be Gardner Minshew and not Jalen Hurts. A lot of conversation in Philadelphia if they ran with Hurts too much. In Dallas, a lot of people seem to be down on Dak. I don't know. I mean, that last interception certainly wasn't his fault. They scored a lot of points.
Obviously, if Minshew plays, the Eagles' offense will look different because all the run game elements that Hurts is a major part of, which puts tremendous stress and challenge on defenses, will not be there. So the run game would have to be a little more conventional, which they're very capable of doing. They've got a terrific offensive line that can move people. One of the things I was looking at this hard this week, the Eagles far and away have the most third down sacks in the NFL, okay? And they lead the league in sacks, but far and away they have the most third down sacks. Ross, 30 of their 56 sacks have come on third down. That is a very, very high number. Hassan Reddick, 9 of his 12 sacks have come on third down. Think about that for a minute. And Dak is essentially at this point a pocket quarterback. Now, we saw last week that the Cowboys did not want to move the rookie Tyler Smith from left tackle where he's played all year. So Tyron Smith came back and he played right tackle. And actually he rotated with Jason Peters, who played 21 snaps at right tackle. So I don't know what they plan on doing this week. But, the Cowboys have been scoring points. You could make the argument that the Cowboys really just have one quality wideout at this point. Gallup has not returned to what he was before all his injuries. They're playing Brown, who's, a nice player, but, he's certainly not a guy you worry about from a defensive game planning standpoint. Their run game is solid. They have, 2 backs, although Pollard clearly has more juice than Elliott when you put the tape on. So this is not a team that has a lot of offensive firepower, and they do score a lot of points. I think Dak's played solid football. Again, you get down to what is a guy being asked to do, and, they run the ball pretty effectively, but they don't have a lot in terms of weapons on the perimeter.
I didn't realize 30 of 56 on third down is a high percentage. I guess in my head, I would think more than half of most team sacks would be on third down, right?
And that might be true.
More likely to pass it.
That might be true, but the next closest team has 21. So, the Eagles are really good on third down. They've started to increase their use of stunts over the last month or so because they were pretty much a straight rush team for a good part of the season. And now they've started to expand how they pressure the quarterback. They're not a high percentage blitz team. They have 56 sacks, Ross. All 53 of those 56 have come from defensive linemen. Only 3 have come from a linebacker or a safety, 2 by TJ Edwards and 1 by Gardner Johnson. 53 have come from defensive linemen.
Wow. What about the Packers and the Dolphins? That's the best of the 3 games on Christmas Day. And I saw the Packers Monday night. I think they're starting to feel a little bit better about where they're at. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs this year. Meanwhile, the Dolphins have lost 3 in a row.
Yeah, although I thought Tua played well against Buffalo. I watched that tape. Obviously there was a lot of talk because he was in Buffalo and the weather wasn't great. Even before it snowed, it was cold. I thought he played well. And the Bills were aggressive with pressure throughout the game, both zone and man pressure concepts, and Tua handled that very well, as did the entire offense. And I think the run game started to show up a little bit, and I think they would like to be able to do that. As far as the Packers, they're a different offense to watch now. Isn't it interesting to watch the Packers? This is not just Aaron Rodgers. In fact, they don't throw it as much as they used to at all. They're really kind of a running football team. The pass game is I don't want to say it's erratic. That's not the right word, but it's not Aaron Rodgers dropping back, throwing it all over the yard. That's not the way they're playing offense right now. And they got Dobbs back this week, and he was a factor. Obviously, Watson can be a factor because of his verticality and his explosive playability. But they're kind of a more complete, multi-dimensional offense that is not solely relying on Aaron Rodgers just to make plays.
Check him out on social media. He's the man at Greg Cosell. That way, you know everything that he's up to, always, including joining us every Thursday here on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Thank you, Greg. Happy holidays.
Same to you, Ross. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I appreciate diversity. I appreciate a diversified portfolio. I appreciate Masterworks. Look, everybody knows, well, not everybody knows, but if you invest money, you kind of know what the market's been like recently. You know what they're predicting. You know all that stuff. Do you know that Masterworks actually gained value the last time inflation caused this much damage? One of only 3 things to do so. Because Masterworks lets you invest in fine art from legends like Picasso and Banksy. They break it into shares. Their last 3 sales, 13, 17, 21, 33% net returns to investors. Pretty good. At masterworks.com, use promo code ROSS. You'll get priority access into these funds. That's promo code ROSS at masterworks.com for priority access. See important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.com/CD.
Tuck's Takes.
Good morning, Ross. We'll start with, there was a lot of conversation around the NFL yesterday around the tragic loss of Franco Harris. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think I told this story yesterday because I didn't think of it while we were recording the show when we found out the news about Franco Harris. But I had one interaction with him. His son actually was my year, was a classmate of mine at Princeton. His son's name is Doc, D-O-K. And I think Franco Harris, freshman year, I want to say, was on campus. Might have been Parents' Weekend or something. I don't know. I might have had a few daddy sodas that night, and I saw him across the way, and I yelled, "Hey, Franco, did you really catch that pass?" It's so funny because you think about like how often that's probably happened in his life. Like how often I saw where my buddy Kyle Brandt was talking about a story where he saw him on campus and was just like nicely asking questions. I wasn't nicely asking questions. I like yelled from 50 feet away, "Did you look at?" And he's like, "I don't know," like that. Because he always kept the sort of the ruse on as to whether or not it was a catch or not. So that's my only Franco Harris story. I don't think I met him any other time. I might have, but I don't believe so. But just trying to share a story. He laughed when I asked it across the courtyard or whatever it is on campus.
Tuck's Takes.
Some other sad news. Broncos Super Bowl running back Ronnie Hillman passed away at the age of 31 after a battle of cancer.
That just stinks. 31. So young. Just obviously, I think about people's families when that happens. You just think about how tough that must be for all of his close people, family, friends, loved ones. Awful.
Tuck's Takes.
The Pro Bowl rosters came out last night. Do you have any thoughts on those?
I don't really care that much about the rosters themselves or snubs or whatever. I'm sure there's other shows that dive into that. I do, though, want to comment on a video I saw last night of the Commanders. And look, they need stuff like this. They need some positive publicity. I watched it 2 or 3 times, watched it twice with my daughters. Ron Rivera, the Commanders head coach, who's a gem of a guy, tells Jonathan Allen he made the Pro Bowl, and he's like, yeah, I kind of figured. Tells Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin's like, oh, that's dope. And then tells Tress Way, and Tress Way's like, awesome. And then he tells Tress Way that Jeremy Reeves made it. And if you check my social media at Ross Tucker NFL, Jeremy Reeves is a 2018 undrafted free agent who's been on and off the practice squad really for 4 years, 18, 19, 20, 21, cut about a zillion times. And this year he's on the roster. This year he's playing his butt off on special teams. And he made the Pro Bowl as a special teamer. And when Ron Rivera told him, he broke down. And I think that really resonates with everybody, but especially people that know how hard it is to get to that level, know how hard it is to battle to stay at that level, and know how hard it is, the path is as like an undrafted guy. That really got me in my feels, as they say. That really hit home.
Tuck's Takes.
Some quarterback news, a lot of quarterback news, actually. Nick Foles will start for the Colts instead of Matt Ryan. Trace McSorley will start for the Cardinals with Colt McCoy still out. And the Titans signed quarterback Josh Dobbs off the Lions practice squad, which doesn't bode well for Ryan Tannehill.
No, it doesn't. Bunch of things here. Matt Ryan, I mean, he's like top 7, top 8 in yards and touchdowns and all of these stats. Got benched twice in the same season. Once for Sam Ehlinger, once for Nick Foles. It's rough, bro. That's a rough way for Matt Ryan to go out. I don't really feel bad for him. You know, he's had a lot of success, made a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. It's still just, I'm sure, not how he envisioned it ending. But the reality is, it doesn't end well for most people, right? Like, how many guys does it end where they're like really playing well and they have a great season or they win the Super Bowl? That is like few and far between. I'm excited for Trace McSorley getting his first start against Tom Brady. He'll remember that forever. You know, they can never take away that you started an NFL game. I'll never forget my first start against the Colts in 2002. And I just thought, first of all, I thought I better play well or it'll be my only start ever. But secondly, speaking of like the Jeremy Reeves video, Jack, when I was in the tunnel at Lucas Oil Stadium, no, the RCA Dome, and they said at left guard in his second year from Princeton, Ross Tucker, and I ran out. Gosh, that was like, you know, you're only 23. I was only 23, so it's not like I was that old, but that was the culmination of a whole lot of work and a whole lot of people that helped me get there. As for Josh Dobbs, there's some reports out there they don't think Tannehill will play again this season, which that makes it even tougher for the Titans to win that division.
Tuck's Takes.
Lastly, we got a big game tonight. Playoff implications. Jets and the Jags. Who do you like and why?
Well, I like the fact that I'll be sitting in my house, in my basement, which I love, with a cold Labatt Blue Light watching the game tonight. No better way to watch Thursday Night Football than with the pristine Canadian goodness of a cold Labatt Blue Light in my hand and yours. Stock up. It's the holidays, baby. I'll be taking, I think, a 30-pack of Labatt Blue Light to my brother-in-law's tomorrow. Shout out Christian Lamana. Share a Labatt on December 23rd with him, celebrating with my sister's family tomorrow because I'm working on Christmas Eve. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer. It's delicious. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. As for the game, Jack, I like the Jags. You know, we all heard Greg Cosell talk about Zach Wilson right there. Last I checked, by the way, the Jags were 1.5-point underdogs, which, by the way, makes them an excellent teaser leg on DraftKings. Wow, it's up to +2. A lot of money coming in on the Jets, that means. I like the Jags +2. I like the Jags as a teaser leg. Unfortunately, that's not what the spread was when we recorded Even Money podcast. But, I think it's going to be a good game. I guess it's really simple. I have more faith in Trevor Lawrence than I do in Zach Wilson. I think the Jets overall probably better team than the Jags are, but quarterback's pretty important. Trevor Lawrence, pretty good. Zach Wilson, not so sure. Shout outs. How about myfrontpagestory.com? I mean, come on. You still got a couple days left. Even if you don't get the story in time, if you haven't gotten somebody a gift, you can still order the story at myfrontpagestory.com and give them the receipt and say, I got a story written all about you. It's in the works. Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com, SteakhouseSports.com, Go-Bengals.com, Evergreen Economics, BackOfficeScheduler.com, Vision Comics with an X. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll have the Friday picks bright and early tomorrow morning. I think we're done here.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.